If you were around during the 2000s, then you probably remember these DVD storage cases. Whether they were yours, your parents, or your barber's, there's an 80% chance you're familiar with them and just about how many movies, games, or music CDs you see rotating in and out of them. And if you do remember them, then there's an even higher percentage chance that you remember the CDs that came out of them not looking like this or this, but this.
I call it bold and bright.
A plain shiny disc with a title written crudely on it with Sharpie or whatever else marker was around at the time. Before Netflix, Spotify, Steam, Xbox Live, etc., we had what I call the golden age of piracy. You may argue, but we can pirate so many things much more easily now. Isn't this the golden age? This is the platinum age, because the burnt CD disc boom was a beast of an era that changed the way people looked at bootleg media, and it was the first time it became widely available. We had to work for piracy, and by we, I mean my dad, because I was just a kid that didn't think twice about the games I was throwing into my Dreamcast. But aside from the discs, this era was when media piracy began to resemble the form it has now. First, we have to paint a picture of the internet and media landscape back then, going back to the late 90s. In 1995, the internet was still very young and very slow. Computers still used dial-up, which was using a telephone line and modem to connect after all. The net just recently became a public tool. Despite this, like in the case of much new tech, it wasn't widely accepted or used despite being so groundbreaking. But that was far from the only tech innovation that was ready to contribute to the continued rise of the pirate's life. In the 80s, music would move from the cassette format to CDs, and movies would join in this movement in the 90s with the development of video CDs.
This is the album of the future, and it's fast becoming a hit. It's called a CD. That's short for compact disc. The music on one of these is recorded by computer. When you play it back through a sound system, it's better than any recording.
By the late 90s, all of our media would begin to fully ditch the tapes and go disc mode. This meant not only going out and buying replacements for all of your favorite albums and movies, but also that the media pirates would need to begin finding a way to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. Of course, piracy didn't begin with the internet or the CD format. In the tape era, there were many ways to capture media you didn't own for personal consumption, to sell, or simply share. Pirates would tape record films in theaters or at homes, duplicate rented VHS tapes, record vinyls to blank cassette tapes, or record cassette tapes to another blank tape. While these methods proved successful enough, quite frankly, the quality tended to be straight garbage. But that was about to change with the advent of a new medium to house our media. Medium to house our media, medium to house our media, medium to house our media. Okay, it's actually not that hard.
Here at Walmart, I'm bringing it to you like this. Everything you're looking for is here in the home entertainment department. Looks like a CD, smells like a CD, but guess what? It's a DVD. The latest, the newest, the coolest.
Every kind of movie for every kind of person.
Gamers, I hear you out there.
As I said earlier, the CD format was adopted by the media scene in the 90s and would eventually obliterate the tapes in the 2000s, where DVDs and DVD players would begin to outsell their VHS counterparts. So imagine being that guy still trying to sell bootleg movies on tapes. Yeah, that's not happening. Let it go, brother, cause you're going CD shopping and you better get ready to spend some money, cause media piracy wasn't cheap in the beginning of the CD era. In the late 80s, CDR, or compact disc recording technology, would see the light of day. Commonly known for its usage in CD burning, CDR allowed for anyone to write their own data to blank CDs. This new component was the piece of the puzzle that every bootlegger would have to adopt if they wanted to keep their piracy screams afloat going into the next decade. But it wouldn't be widely available to consumers until the mid-90s, and even then you wouldn't be getting your hands on an actual CD burner unless you could pay the price of admission. In 1995, CD burners would finally see a wide release but were priced at $1,000, with it being news that one would release at $995. I've seen forum posts from people claiming that they've gotten their hands on one at $500 in the year 2000, signifying that this was simply an early adopter's fee. But still, $500? Do you know how much these prices are when adjusted for today? $1,000 in 1995 is around $2,100, and 500 in 2000 is around 1,000 today. Even if my numbers are off, first of all, I blame this site. But still, that's a lot regardless. Like I said, CD piracy was definitely pay to play, but for that pay we got a lot better quality on our bootlegs, as CD burning did not degrade the condition of stored media. So if you had a burner, you were able to pump out product and make some good money selling CDs on the side of the street, in the mall, at your kiosk, or at the barbershop.
I knew people who had stacks, and if you didn't have a CD burner, there were, I'm not even kidding, hair salons downtown, record shops downtown.
Oh, man, that shit I got it from a barbershop. He had a 3 for 10 special. Bullshit. Be quiet and watch the movie, bro.
Excuse me. Ow! What the fuck? You get your feet out the aisle then. Don't worry about what we got going on. Get your feet out the aisle and excuse me.
Listen, selling bootleg DVDs used to be serious business. These dudes would sneak around like they were selling drugs, and it wasn't just an American thing. This post by Donnell Walter showed that in London, dudes would be watching out for police while trying to discreetly get your attention to sell you Dragon Ball Evolution or the Shaggy Dog, and run when the police looked their way. But they only played it serious because in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was serious. We joke now, but those piracy commercials were dead serious for those that could actually get caught selling this stuff. Did you know that in 2012, a Mississippi man got 18 years in jail after being caught selling bootleg DVDs and CDs to an undercover cop? They searched his home and found 10,000 counterfeit discs and the computer equipment he used to do it. Things got serious. And I said serious that many times because they were serious. And speaking of computers, the advent of the home desktop and CD combination, along with laptops with built-in disk drives, would eventually make CD burning a thing for the masses. We were entering a time where you needed a computer, and that means you just have a CD burner chilling at your home at all times. I remember when my dad and uncle found out about this, and suddenly I saw bootleg CDs all over the place, including, like I said, my Dreamcast. My Sonic Adventure 1 disc looked like this, but Adventure 2 was looking like this. I didn't get it, but I didn't care. This new evolution in tech, along with innovations like the new MP3 format and CDs becoming even more widely available and affordable, led to the slow death of CD piracy in the US, though it still thrived in other countries, but led to the beast of internet piracy that began with none other than Napster. For all you youngins and YNs, Napster is basically the 2000s era Spotify. Or it would be compared to that if we were talking about the new age version, formerly known as Rhapsody. No, the original Napster hit the scene in 1999 and was a peer-to-peer file sharing application based around users uploading, downloading, and sharing mostly digital audio. Of course, that meant Napster was straight up pirate territory. Shortly after Napster was shut down for copyright infringement issues, many other names would pop up and take its place. Few notable names you may be familiar with are Freenet, Kazaa, and LimeWire. Each of these sites had the same basis as Napster, but each also allowed for downloads of pirated films, TV shows, and games. This of course opened the door for hundreds of people to unknowingly download viruses and malware, but maybe that season of The Simpsons was worth it. However, the most influential face in the early internet piracy game easily came in the form of BitTorrent and torrents in general. In 2001, a University of Buffalo student named Bram Cohen would find himself tired of the long peer-to-peer download times. The solution? A client that would download files from multiple servers called seeders. This allowed for the piecing together of files from multiple different sources, even if the file wasn't completely finished downloading on the other's machines. It was easy, cheap, and could be done with just about any type of file. This new style led to the development and launch of the popular torrent hosting site, the Pirate Bay, in 2003, which even after many years of legal trouble and continued government attacks, is still known as the most relevant and popular torrent site out there. This all happened before YouTube was even a thing, with the first ever torrent being of the film The Matrix dropping in 2003. But speaking of YouTube, we can't leave that out of the piracy conversation. When the platform dropped in 2005, it was a lot different than now. In fact, it was just about Lawless. Listen, I used to watch full television series, movies, and of course anime via YouTube. In fact, many of us, including you watching, probably discovered what anime was because we could watch shows other than the mainstream ones on YouTube. You 100% found things like Haruhi Suzumiya and Lucky Star and other series such as those because of YouTube piracy. Heck, that's how I found out that there was a sequel to Naruto already out in Japan when I was just finishing watching the Chunin exams. Like, what do you mean Naruto is a teenager and he's wearing black now? Piracy was legit just a way of life back then and allowed for the media to be more readily available. You know how nowadays we're always Googling, where can I watch so and so, or back then when you were trying to watch a series but maybe the DVD was out of stock or something. Some of you probably weren't even around for that. Or of course, my Naruto example, where there was a piece of media out there I was interested in, but there was no way to watch it except through piracy. But then the internet and the world around it began to become more regulated and culture shifted. Those anti-piracy PSAs were a sign for real. When the late 2000s and 2010s hit, the world began to move towards media streaming, and thus, media needed to become more regulated in order for big companies to make money. Things like Google's purchase of YouTube led to it becoming an overregulated, anti-copyright nightmare for creators, along with keeping the pirated content at a minimum. Consumer want of convenience over anything plays a hand in this as well. I don't have all these specifics, but I remember there being a Scott Stash video I was watching where he was talking about how he could emulate or something, but it was just easier and way more convenient to just buy the game on the online marketplace of one of his consoles and play it from there. That's where a lot of the consensus has gone as of late due to the instant gratification models companies have given us now. Just look at how the Netflix big heads talk about movie theaters. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but you know, we used to be different. I'm just saying we used to be a society. Anyways, piracy is in a place now that we'd never imagined back then. You can get just about anything you want from torrent sites and even elsewhere. There were times in high school we'd watch films in class from one of those bootleg movie sites, like 123 Movie and all that stuff. So you know that it's mainstream now. Like, does anyone remember the era of every old person and parent getting one of those Fire Sticks to watch pirated movies and shows on their TVs? From burnt CDs to BitTorrent and anime on YouTube, piracy went from crime to straight up culture, and for a lot of us, it was the only way to enjoy what we loved and still is. I'm looking at the manga and anime industry right now. But if you've got any memories like mine revolving around this, it'll be a joy to read them in the comments below. I always read all my comments, and yeah, these will be no different. And if you enjoy hearing about history like this, then hit subscribe to let the algorithm know too, so I can share with more people like you. Do you ever sit back and think about how ironic it is that the media made to be comfortable for us as kids are some of the first things that jump to mind when it comes to traumatic experiences? I use the word traumatic in the least dramatic way possible, but it's so true. It's embarrassing, but I have a huge case of arachnophobia and a little fear of bugs in general that goes all the way back to 2 instances in my life. Opening my science book in elementary school to the giant face of a spider, and that darn butterfly face in SpongeBob, which I actually learned from a comment on one of my older videos that it was apparently a horsefly face. Some may argue that the same can go for 2010s and 20s shows, but as kids shows and toys didn't really become that cool until the 80s,
Hovercraft holds 9 Joes. It's the big new way to bring the Joe team into action, and it floats on water.
cartoons weren't truly creepy until the 2000s. Even the most innocent show would slip in these freaky moments that knew how to get under your skin after school and stick with you for the rest of the week. But why was this the case? Why did shows suddenly get extra around the clock weird, and why did it feel like you were constantly one commercial break from a jump scare moment?
You're all going to die.
What?
As always, to find the answer we have to jump back a decade to the 90s. After the cartoons of the 80s began to have their fall off, it was time for a rework. Children's media became more regulated due to the Children's Television Act of 1990, which aimed to limit advertisement and kids shows. This meant that cartoons would need to grow identities past selling toys, and resulted in our shows having deeper personalities than the simple hero versus villain. If you were to compare the original Transformers cartoons to Beast Wars, this change would be super evident.
Yes.
and yes, I'm always trying to find a way to talk about Beast Wars. Shows now needed to stand on their own and keep us watching for other reasons. The episodic series became more prevalent and mature themes were explored, reflecting the more edgy world around us. But the more things changed, the more they stayed the same. While the 90s would feature darker content, it wasn't the creep factor that the 2000s features. Some of it was more so what we classify as brain rot gross factor, as seen in Ren and Stimpy or modern SpongeBob. Or you may see true theatrical horrors, like you see in Batman the Animated Series. Heck, even Rugrats would delve into that film-like horror from time to time. Remember Boppo, anyone? Hi, I'm Boppo.
Hi, I'm Boppo.
In fact, if you look at most 90s cartoons, the main focus was still comedy with an emphasis on slapstick humor. Freakazoid, My Goat, Johnny Bravo, Kablam, The Mask, etc. But the closer we got to the 2000s, the more you see seeds of creep being sown, such as the 1993 release of The Nightmare Before Christmas, which was early 90s, I know, but those emo scene and goth kids were in a chokehold from that MF throughout the 2000s till today. There were also shows like Cow and Chicken, Ah Real Monsters, and Cat Dog that would air with surreal weirdness that would stem from their bizarre premises. Boundaries were already being pushed, and media owners were finding out that kids might be into scares due to successes like Are You Afraid of the Dark? But once late 1999 hit, we would enter the age of what I classify as the internet horror era, where kids became freaks and weirdos. It's me. I was a kid back then. I was freaks and weirdos. Courage the Cowardly Dog would air in November of 1999. This show needs no introduction, but for the uninformed, Courage was a show about a dog living in the middle of nowhere that would constantly come face to face with different horrors each episode. The show would feature new types of horror, not typically seen in your average children's programming. Jump scares, those uncanny faces we see so much in analog horror now, and a more horrific atmosphere to keep viewers on edge. This was the forefather of a new era of horror cartoons and media, both indie and corporate produced, and it would serve as proof for it being a viable route in the once innocent world of children's programming. This new era greatly shifted following Courage as the world around it shifted as well. Children's media from a post 9/11 and early digital age period would reflect more anxieties, confusion, and weirdness. And we truly can't talk about that weirdness without talking about a few of these actual shows. So let's take a look at some of the kids' media that kept us from going to bed before talking about how they came to be. Invader Zim is one of the most prolific cult cartoons there is. Following right behind the foundation left by Courage, Zim upped the ante tenfold. Whereas Courage was a cartoon following a protagonist looking to keep us, and himself, safe from the scaries, Zim was preying on our downfall, with the series' heroic stand-in being tortured nearly every episode. I've talked about it before, but I've gotta talk about it again. Dark Harvest is the episode that showcases how dark this show can be, with Zim harvesting and eating organs from children and painfully replacing them with different objects. But that's far from the only dark episode. Listen, only Invader Zim could make a Christmas episode into an Akira parody. Alongside Zim was Grim and Evil, two Maxwell Adams shows better known for when they split into two separate programs, Evil Con Carne and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. These two shows were full of dark twists like bad endings for innocent characters, gross out moments, and tons of nightmare fuel. The Billy and Mandy intro features Billy and Mandy beginning as skeletons and having their muscle and skin added, which really sets the tone for the series. Remember Puddin getting tore up by that demon bunny rabbit and taking a cactus to the eye? Or Billy getting executed by a firing squad? And Mandy in general. Evil Con Carne basically followed those same beats, but replaced the demonic horror with the horrors of mutation and war. Like, just look at our main character. You can't help but love him though. In the case of both of these shows, there's something from every episode here that'll make you either laugh, wince, or rethink why you're watching this in the first place. SpongeBob is a show that was full of actually creepy moments early on. It's SpongeBob, so I'm not going to go over the bases. You've seen it before. But there are a few standout moments like the endless hell zipper void, the real life gorilla, and the butterfly. While not a cartoon, the children's puppet show Mr. Meaty featured tons of nightmare fuel moments. Hey, look at the whole show. It can be classified as nightmare fuel. I liked it though. Like I said, I was a freaking weirdo. The show is a parody on the teen sitcom that would tend to stray on the gross out and darker side. There's the tapeworm episode where a guy willingly tapes the tapeworm from one of the main characters.
That's the stuff.
The CEO of Mr. Meaty, Mr. Carney, who looks like a creepy zombie. An episode where two characters get their hands stuck in a deep fryer before eating their own hands. A cannibal episode. I mean, I could make a whole video on this one show, but I'm sure there's already one out there. Finally, there was those 2000 shows that thrived on the group of kids that fell in love with Tim Burton media and dark flash games and animations. Making Fiends, Growing Up Creepy, and Edgar and Ellen. Stuff that feels like you should have been watching them on YouTube or Newgrounds back in the day.
You'd better watch out. He can cut more than rope with those scissors.
He can cut paper too?
No.
Cardboard?
No.
Coupons?
No.
Beards? Buttercup?
These three shows weren't scary per se, but were full of creepy designs and bleak atmospheres that 2000s edgy kids and teens loved. They were shows that could be compared to what Wednesday is now, where you either just didn't watch, thought they were okay, or completely made them your entire personality. Of course, there are other shows with intentionally creepy moments in 2000s cartoons that showcase the shift in the darker territory. Codename Kids Next Door with the I Crust Food Harvest episode, My Life as a Teenage Robot with the Body Dysmorphia exosuit, The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack and Its Everything. Cartoons legit went off the deep end when it came to introducing horror to our after-school diets, to the point where Cartoon Network introduced the pseudo crossover of multiple shows via an alien invasion event. But why this trend versus anything else for children's programming? Well, some believe that more creative freedoms were given to the writers in this era. While there's no outright evidence for this belief, the product sure does support the claim. Animation and puppet shows were now being made for more audiences than just kids, which opened the door to companies understanding more than just one audience existed for all of this, such as the case with movies like Shrek being digestible for both adults and kids with its more edgy writing.
Really? Okay.
And that's not even to mention anime beginning to boom in the West. There was basically a lot of growth and more willingness to take risks after the 90s proved we don't need a toy line to make a successful cartoon. Plus the market success of more darker media like the continued love of Tim Burton stuff and Donnie Darko helped too. But we can't talk about the media recognizing that kids were sick in the head and liked creepy stuff without bringing up the early internet. One look at what kids were being exposed to and enjoying online with the early web will tell you all that you need to know about the market research that companies were doing back then.
You can have my big gay dad.
Seriously, between all those dark flash games, animations, creepypasta, and YouTube videos we used to consume, our web histories must have been insane. It's no wonder we're so messed up right now. People always bring up Call of Duty lobbies because the 2000s online world was built on dark humor and kids were constantly being exposed to it, for better and for worse. The 2000s were simply a continuation of the 90s where kids shows stopped coddling their viewers. They were becoming a lot more mature, and this evolution can still be seen with the more story-driven programming that kids have now. Look at how many children and adults alike enjoy shows like Steven Universe, Regular Show, Gumball, Adventure Time, and once again all the anime that's out there. Those vibes and creepy undertones that these shows feature can be traced back to the cartoons of the 2000s mixed with modern sensibilities. The creepy 2000s kid shows weren't just weird for the sake of it though. They were a reflection of the time, a mix of a post-90s experimental era, low-budget CGI, and a willingness to delve into the dark, surreal, and sometimes disturbing. They feed into a kid's fascination with the unknown, uncanny, bizarre, and grotesque without it being completely brainless. Sometimes. But that's a part of what made them so unforgettable. They still stick with us not because just entertainment, but because they low-key haunted us a little bit and made us feel something new back then. Now those Nicktoons cartoon shorts that aired at like 2 in the morning are a different story. F those for real. Back in the 2000s, before YouTube, before TikTok, before phones had full-on Netflix apps, Staying up too late meant flipping through TV channels, searching for something. You had your video games, DVDs, pirated downloads if you knew the right places, or good old cable TV. And when the lazy brain dead hours hit, like 2 or 3 in the morning, cable was the number one choice for many. So let's put us in the shoes of a typical late night cable watcher. Picture this. You're lying there half awake, Nick at Night is playing the Beverly Hillbillies, Adult Swim already aired that Family Guy rerun, Disney Channel is running the "We Know You're Not Watching This" block with Dave the Barbarian or Brandy and Mr. Whiskers. So you start flipping channels hoping to get entertained or at least distracted before you fall asleep. And boom, you see something like this.
Warning! This video contains explicit material not suitable for children.
The effective, reliable way to natural male enhancement.
All new Man Show Manovations take on practical jokes.
The International Sexy Ladies Show.
Remember, no pain, no gain.
Hey, I wear a scarf. Let me look you over. What? On a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 7. Yeah, thanks. I got a thing for Asian broads.
For kids and teens back then, stumbling across something a little off was extremely common. And when I say off, I mean something that you definitely weren't supposed to be watching. And yet, it was all out in the open. Much of this content wasn't technically adult only, but it tiptoed the line so hard that it left a mark on your childhood. And please forgive me, but I'll have to censor or imply a lot of what I'm talking about here for YouTube's sake. But if you were there, you already know. This stuff is a lot. See, in the 2000s, TV was everything. It had the same addictive pull that social media does now, and similarly, it felt like there were barely any filters. It felt lawless from a kid or teen's point of view. If you thought the motto "sex sells" was relevant now, go back in time and you'll be blown away by entire programming blocks following it to a T. Television unlocked a new world to late night watchers, and a lot of it included some form of gratuitous sexiness, and many young teen boys and girls, I'm sure, didn't mind that at all. When watching movies or something on a more adult-oriented channel like Spike TV, MTV2, or Comedy Central, you'd regularly be interrupted by some wild spring break ads, uncensored DVD commercials, and pretty freaky late night infomercials. Freaky not like Freddy Krueger freaky, but like Lola Bunny and Space Jam freaky. Due to a lot of young watchers not having parental controls attached to their televisions, it was free reign to watch what you wanted when you wanted. You had a remote and a whole cable package to yourself. There are a few big players that I'm sure a lot of you esteemed scholars remember in this field, but where's the fun in not going back through memory lane and looking at all the crap that fried our brain back in the day? Late night TV would regularly feature infomercials for the infamous DVD series Girls Gone Wild. The commercials, which were basically softcore corn, featured barely censored college-age women flashing the camera during spring break parties and other places like that. But these weren't small commercials, like bruh, these were 30-minute infomercials, so you know the viewers were getting busy. And the girls featured, most of the time random students, some that later claimed to have never actually consented to being filmed and exposed in ways that sparked tons of legal backlash.
Says her life was ruined when she appeared on the cover of Girls Gone Wild. She was a child, just 14 at the time.
There was also a Guys Gone Wild, but obviously they didn't get the airtime that these did. One of the most infamous examples of that midnight material is BET Uncut, a now defunct block from the BET channel. This late night block aired around 3 a.m. on weekends and featured music videos that definitely wouldn't make it to daytime TV due to how much they showed. With only light censorship and a heavy dose of controversy, BET Uncut became known for pushing the envelope, especially with videos like Nelly's Tip Drill, which was criticized for being degrading and over the top in how it presented women. The whole block felt like an underground secret, but it wasn't. It was right there on cable, no password, no paywall, just click the channel and watch. A trend followed by everything softcore in the 2000s TV era. Now, if you were a teen boy, chances you've had a few times where your eyes were glued to Spike TV, which was branded as the first network for men, and blatantly targeted young men through adult audiences through edgy content. Remember 1,000 Ways to Die, Cops reruns, Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon, which was low-key just the first time a lot of boys saw uncensored cartoon boobs. Yeah, that channel. To growing minds of the 2000s, one of the crown jewels for this channel was Stripperella, an animated show created by Stan Lee, yes, that Stan Lee, starring Pamela Anderson as a stripper by night and secret agent later by night, who battle enemies like Pushy Galore and other crazy names like that. The show was obviously a parody on Saturday morning hero cartoons, but was written like a horny 14-year-old's comic doodles, and it actually didn't air too late. You stay up a little bit past your bedtime and you catch it easily. On Comedy Central, you had Jimmy Kimmel's breakthrough hit show, The Man Show, a sketch comedy about beer, boobs, and why women quote-unquote don't get it. This program ended up becoming well known for its large-chested female models known as the Juggy Dance Squad, who would dance in themed revealing costumes at the opening of every show. And the show's end segment, Girls on Trampolines, would also bring many eyes to the screens as well. The final channel and program I'll speak on is actually one that's very close to home for me, and I'm sure a lot of you guys. We all remember G4, a channel that was basically marketed towards the stereotypical Asian-loving, basement-dwelling, anime enjoyer gaming nerd. If you were a teen back then, you probably remember Olivia Munn on Attack of the Show, right? A show that was equal parts geeky and horny. Remember that famous hot dog bit and all those times they had her show up in cosplay? Not gonna lie, when I was young, I'm telling you, this woman had me in a choke. Anyways, if you stayed up in the year 2009, you check your guide late at night and see nothing related to games on G4. Not unusual, but sometimes you see a peculiar title called the International Sexy Ladies Show. Being what some of you classify as a young man of culture, I checked it out back in the day and my mind was blown. The show is disguised as a comedy commentary show, but the commentary is where the comedy ends. In fact, I remember most of the time I would just mute the dang show, not just to ignore the male voices, but so I didn't get caught watching it. What the show is in actuality is a bunch of clips from TV shows and DVDs taken from around the world that showcase scantily clad women, mud wrestling, roller coaster pops, sexy movie moments, etc. Something I couldn't imagine just being on television for anyone to watch that absolutely was. Among all this was tons of other obscenely related commercials for enhancing drugs, MTV2, party hotlines, NSFW commercials like Paris Hilton's Crystal Burger commercial, and a lot more. But all of this really raises the question, how did any of this make it to air? All this softcore media was airing on basic cable and at times not even super late. The answer is really simple. Cable in the 2000s began like the Wild West. In 1972, cable began to become deregulated, with the first premium cable company, HBO, being introduced, allowing paying customers to watch films right in their homes when they wanted. HBO was followed by tons of other cable networks, and in actuality, many of these networks began building with smut material. According to an article on the website Mental Floss, HBO chairman Michael Fuchs, yes, that's his name, Michael Fuchs. Look. Yeah, how fitting for this video, Michael Fuchs. Anyway, Michael Fuchs himself, that sounded even worse. So Michael Fuchs told a new employee that, quote unquote, randy guys are a major part of our demographic. Soon a new formula was introduced to the premium cable media world by the Playboy channel. That formula was quote unquote spicy but not obscene. Thus, the future of cable saw other channels trying to follow this, both to success and failure, as in the case of BET Uncut and the Girls Gone ads, which took things too far. Networks knew exactly what they were doing by placing these things on air late at night, high-key targeting night owl dads, curious teenagers, and anyone else flipping channels with nothing better to do. Parents weren't setting up digital locks or restrictions like some do now, because this was all still pretty fresh. This would all go the way of the Western when the internet started becoming what it is now. Honestly, do you think I cared about the Sexy Ladies Show when I found out what they were hosting on Newgrounds and all those other sites back in the day? YouTube, computers, and especially smartphones and iPods made all of this obsolete instantly because it was there at all times. What made it even harder for these programs to thrive was that others started noticing. Advocacy groups started getting loud, such as in the case of women studies students at Spelman College speaking out against BET Uncut and Nelly's Tip Drill. Lawsuits started appearing, as in multiple cases against GGW, because the only wild thing was how much exploitation was going on. Censorship also became a bit stricter, with the world's eyes being closer on parental controls and heavier enforced rating systems. All of this led to many networks cutting back. However, all of this stuff never truly went away, as it left a mark on the media world for, well, mostly the worse. YouTube shock humor, Twitch and TikTok thirst traps, all that line-pushing, dopamine-driven media was passed down, digitized, and decentralized. And it's all even worse because the internet has no curfew. The 2000s were truly a lawless time for the media, and even the wild stuff like this is remembered by many because there was an innocence or loss thereof to it. I didn't know what I was getting into when I got a cable box in my room. I just wanted to watch cartoons and got handed an unfiltered crash course in sex, shock, and marketing. Now a new generation is getting the same thing tenfold, but in their pockets instead of on channel 1413. But let's not end this video on a downer, and instead laugh at how hilarious it is that this stuff was just chilling on TV out in the open. So tell me, what are some funny memories you have about coming into contact with these not for kids programs? And did you ever get caught, or were you on high alert back then? Trust, I read all my comments and I promise not to make fun of you too hard. Thanks so much for watching and all the support and helping me get partnered so quickly. I upload weekly, so feel free to like and subscribe for more 2000s nostalgia, both fun and sometimes scary. Thank you so much again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. These days, independently produced and created video games, otherwise known as indies, are simply a part of the mainstream gaming sphere. While PlayStation and Xbox are busy spending millions on some mid, there's always seems to be some indie title waiting to steal all the attention away and bring back quote-unquote real gaming once more. However, if you grew up in the early 2000s generation of gaming with Dreamcast, GameCube, and PS2, this was never the case. Every game felt like it was typically from some big corporation, a subsidiary of them, or a smaller studio. Ironic considering the first made video game, Space War, or Space War, because the exclamation mark, was technically an indie game. During this time, the closest most would get to what we consider indie games now were various flash games going up on Miniclip, Newgrounds, Cool Math Games, and other sites in that vein. If you're wondering why this was the case, the answer is obvious: distribution. Think about it. An independent company is exactly that, independent. Everything comes at a cost. Developmental tools, paying collaborators if needed, time away from actual work, and on top of that would come distribution. There was just no feasible way for some small company to pump out a small game with no way of getting word out and then pay costs to get the game mass produced on a CD to ship out to crickets.
信じられなかったですけどね、本当に。ゲーム自体が古い感じのゲームなんで、それが最新型のゲーム機で扱われることになるとは思わなかったですね。
Now, I'm not saying indie games weren't happening before the 2000s. In fact, for a while, as in the case of Space War, most games started off as indies. Typically, one guy or a group of people would make some standout title, find a way to publish or get discovered by some larger company, and then sometimes blow up from there. This was the case with Rare, Traveler's Tales, Rockstar, and more. It's famously how id Software began with Doom. But as with YouTube opening up video production beyond needing to land some Hollywood contract, the wider internet opened the way for more devs to push their products and projects out into the world. There were always tons of indie games around, but just as in the case of indie films, only a few would seep through the cracks into mainstream success until some big corporation put spotlight on them. This is why the wider indie market was simply designated to flash games in the 2000s. It's much easier for a small team of developers to get a product out there if its ecosystem is readily available to a digital marketplace that potential players can access at a moment's notice. For example, the developer of the flash game Proximity actually spoke out on the development of flash games in a Reddit thread stating, "I did the programming on my own, and the games that actually had decent art are when I teamed up with artists I met on Newgrounds or via the Clock Crew. I either left out music, used music I shouldn't have, In my defense, a lot of Flash games back then did that, or eventually started using music loops I created with FL Studio. But when the gaming ecosystem hit digital shelves of mainstream home consoles, everything changed. That's where Xbox comes in. During the early 2000s gaming generation, the only console with anything close to real acceptable internet connection that was ready out of the box was the original Xbox.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah, I might want to use that sometime, Bill.
However, the tech and infrastructure didn't hit close to where we are now until 2006 with the release of the Xbox 360.
Hey, you're just mad because I'll be able to do something with my fucking guitar in hands that you'll never be able to achieve in your entire life, kid. So yeah, you're gay.
One of the main selling points of this entire generation was the seamless internet connectivity that each console came equipped with. Not only did this mean you'd be able to browse the internet, but downloadable media would become part of the gaming space. And that meant the wall to create and release your own game to mass audiences went down that much more. If you were growing up around this era with an Xbox and those profile pictures of dogs and bubblegum blowers, then that online marketplace definitely has a spot in your core memories. Not only because you had access to the popular games at the time, or the mini demos, or even because the retro game offerings during the retro boom era, 100% you remember scrolling and seeing some weird game you never expected to see on a home console. Some one-off that would feel more at home on Newgrounds or something, like this weird anime milk chop game I found on there when I was too young to even be seeing something like that. Digital marketplaces like Xboxes became breeding grounds for small development teams to throw their crap at the wall and see what sticks or simply earn a quick buck. This is because Xbox decided to get at the forefront of this bright community of developers by releasing development tools for the 360 in 2006 via its XNA Game Studio Express 1.0 kits. While this allowed developers to create games, those titles were regulated to their own consoles until 2008, when Xbox officially unveiled the community games section of its marketplace. This allowed devs to bring their games to the Xbox digitally and get their games in the faces of more players beyond those on PC. Not only was this an act of goodwill to the indie scene, but a way to give Xbox something to make it more unique than Nintendo and PlayStation's marketplaces. But Xbox's indie ventures didn't end with the company opening the door for anyone to just step in. It went out to find indie products to headline the market and push unique experiences from small studios. This is the tale that arguably the first mainstream title of the start of the indie era we're in, Braid, followed.
Hey, it's your boy Soulful. Tell them they got this game, right? Oh no, this shit called Braid. Oh no, hey, watch this shit. It's about this little guy in a suit, and he look like Mario in the future. And he just walk around jumping the shit. But what's the funny part about it? You can do this right here. Watch this. You? What you do? How you do that? How you do that? You didn't catch that. And they ain't got no point to the game. You just walk around jumping on shit. It look like
they're not seeing the most important thing.
This shit's stupid as hell, man.
Yes, I know before Braid there were games like Cave Story, but Braid was different, as it was an indie game that was being pushed into the mainstream on a largely successful home console by a huge company like Microsoft. Braid released to critical acclaim and success despite some disagreements between Xbox and the game's creator, Jonathan Blow. This was a running trend with Xbox and indie developers that pushed to publish titles to its marketplace service. Conversations between Microsoft and Twisted Pixel, the indie company behind games like The Maw, Explosion Man, and one of my personal favorite underrated gems, Comic Jumper, The Adventure of Captain Smiley, were full of negative discussions that led to them potentially submitting pitches to Nintendo's WiiWare service instead. Yep, that's right. Nintendo's WiiWare service originally was supposed to mirror Xbox's marketplace, giving small developers a space to pitch products and potentially have them published to its grounds. According to Game Informer in 2011, Twisted Pixel was the first indie developer to get the green light from Nintendo. However, that all fell through when WiiWare removed the submission process and Twisted Pixel decided to go along with Xbox. There was also the well-known indie company, The Behemoth, the brilliant minds behind Alien Hominid and the classic Castle Crashers. the latter of which was produced for the Xbox marketplace and the former being ported to it as well. The time was simply ripe for indie games to hit the scene as pixel graphics were making a comeback and storefronts were no longer an issue. But one of the largest components of newfound success for indie games was revenue. Remember when I said that PCs were always full of indie games? Well, you know what else the PC gaming space is full of? People that don't like to pay for games and will get around your paywall by any means necessary. Why do you think there was a class of PC indie games called freeware? At the time, no one was really used to buying games over the internet, and they weren't about to start now. Not until a regulator came around. Xbox can sort of be seen as the beta version of that regulator. This marketplace requiring that players pay for indie games actually put some revenue into the pockets of developers, giving more incentive to keep producing for the platform. This allowed indie projects to increase their quality and to create new niches in gaming that we weren't getting from the mainstream AAAs chasing the current Western-oriented trends. While Xbox wasn't the only piece of the puzzle when it came to extending the reach and increasing the popularity of indie games, its marketplace was truly an instrumental part in getting them to where they are now. I'll give credit to Steam and streamer culture, of course, but Xbox truly was a different beast when it came to getting those odd little pieces of art into the face of someone I promise you would never have even thought twice about them. Or do I need to show the classic Soulja Boy Braid video again? As with the rest of the modern gaming marketplaces, Xbox has maintained this push of indie games and even continues this job of pushing them, including them in its Game Pass subscription, which largely carries the same exposure power that its old arcade promos did for a new generation. It's amazing to look and see where indie games are at currently and how they now have the power to even outshine many AAA games. While Xbox offered a push, you truly have to appreciate the minds and determination of the actual creators behind these small titles. There are so many great ideas that we probably would never have seen without them forcing their way into the spotlight. Undertale, Bomb Rush, Pizza Tower, Hylix. I could go on forever. It's always a joy to see what comes next from the indie scene, and it's wild that Xbox had a hand in getting it to where it is now. Back in the early 2000s, the world was a very different place. Things were a lot less censored and more chaotic in many ways, bringing all the good and bad that comes with that. I mean, Rush Hour has a warning before it airs on television now. I never imagined something like that back in the day. We were all a lot more curious and green behind the ears when it came to technology. And don't forget, we were still a mostly physically connected world. Third spaces were aplenty, and much more than now, people were more open to being approached and interacting with strangers. All this was put to the test when the internet went public and mainstream from the late 90s through 2000s.
If you're one of them, you can now glimpse the future with nothing more than a modem, a phone line, and a few dollars a month.
Every business, no matter how large, and no matter how small, will be on the internet in the year 2000. It's the primary way that people will look up information. It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
You've probably heard me and others describe the early internet as the Wild West, and that's no exaggeration, though it is a very overused description for everything on YouTube now. See, back then there was no algorithm, no over-the-shoulder moderation, no constant trigger warnings. In fact, most would be looking for you to get triggered. No guide, parents didn't know how it worked, so they couldn't keep things in check. And for the most part, there were no rules. This early digital world was a chaotic jungle full of viruses, bootlegs, which I've done a video on as well, strangers, nightmares, discovery, and honestly fun. But none of us were truly ready for it. I mean, look at how we handle the internet now and how it constantly interferes with our realities. Yet somehow, many of us thrived in this new ecosystem back then, but not without our own fair share of battle scars. Seriously, I know the previous generation had prawn tapes and magazines, but the content the internet would expose young kids to on a regular basis was no joke. It was edgy and would raise an even edgier generation. But it wasn't just the edge, we were naive and reckless and darn near completely unsupervised. It honestly feels like a social experiment in hindsight, especially as a youngin'. If you were a kid on the net back then, you felt it. In your hard drive, your conscience, your nightmares, your pants, and in your search history.
AOL membership gives you more, and it's so easy to get started. You just plug it in. Easy to use email, buddy list, keywords. At America Online, your security and privacy are always protected.
Let me take you back in time, 2 decades ago to be exact. a time when Ask Jeeves was the search engine of choice, before Google came along to free our searches from being limited to like 1/5 of what was actually out there. A time when AOL CDs were in everyone's drawers due to them being carpet bombed into everyone's mailboxes to introduce us to the internet. Back when DSL was the way we connected to the net, and it felt like the wait to connect was worth it, when even 3 seconds of loading feels like hell now. Okay, maybe that's a bit too far back, but this is where our story begins. And throughout this decade, the internet grows into a more immediately accessible and adventurous luxury. It's new, feels lawless, and pretty raw. Any kid who was raised by Newgrounds and early YouTube will tell you that. There are a few core traits that really sum up what this era of the internet felt like. The first, as you probably heard, is that there was less censorship. That's already a dual-sided coin, but what makes it so negative is that absolutely nothing was age-gated. Shock, prawn, and gore sites were all the rage in this era and spread among kids like a funny simile I can't think of right now. And all of it required no age verification beyond possibly clicking a box saying, yes, I'm 18. Listen, a kid will lie about kicking a ball into your car by mistake or buying some V-Bucks. So you know the growing prawn addicts of the time were ready to lie and see some cheeks for the first time. And I won't lie, I was one of them. And this stuff was so easily accessible back in the day, it's funny. You'd find it even if you weren't looking. The second core trait is the tech naivety that we all had. The internet was completely new ground, and no, that's not an intended pun. But no one knew exactly what was in store. A part of the early charm and fun of the 2000s net is that it felt like there was so much to discover with all the good and bad that comes with that. But this also made us more susceptible to viruses, hackers, and the various pop-ups that we never saw before.
As the I Love You mess gets cleaned up, there's more cyber chaos spreading in the form of these titles. This is a great new game, very funny, even Mother's Day gifts. They're no gifts, they're computer bugs that can ruin certain programs in your files.
RIP to all those destroyed computers out there thanks to some kid doing something that had no business doing. Speaking of that, the final core trait is the blurry identities. The tech naivety combined with a new way of meeting people made for an interesting and dangerous mix. Internet chat rooms were the new hotness. Suddenly you were meeting people who you'd never seen the face of. And as a hormonal teenager, this was huge. Listen, as a kid and a young middle school teen, I was always a nervous and quiet boy, but like Spider-Man puts on a mask and gets a false bravado, I would get a keyboard and mic and do the same. Like, I was swimming in internet girlfriends. And thankfully, we were a little farther along by then, and people were more open to showing their face to confirm with video chats. But, you know, it was a lot to take in, and honestly, it probably wasn't very healthy at all. But of course, there's a less funny and glamorous and more dangerous side to all this that we'll get to later. But before that, let's take a closer look at the stuff that we get into back then, starting with the adult content that was so easy to get a hold of. Like I said, it didn't take a rocket scientist to find the more lewd side of the internet, and it still doesn't. The stories I could tell about my early exposure are sad as hell, but I'm okay now after a little therapy, so we can all laugh at them now. I remember as a young lad, I was a huge Naruto and Dragon Ball fan, so imagine my surprise when I'm searching them on Google and come across a different type of fan art that changes my perspective on the women of both of these series. I was hooked then and there, and the content available on Newgrounds that was hidden as dress-up games didn't help. And I know some of y'all were players of the Meat and F games and the Zone animation series, so, and if you know, you know. The big issue is how easy this stuff was to find and get totally lost in for a kid. Type 18 plus into Google back then, just click and you're in a new world that your young mind is not ready for, and your older mind will regret years later down the line. There is so much that I saw at too young an age to comprehend what I was getting into. These sites and experiences preyed on young minds to find them and add to their constant revenue streams. Hence the lower than dirt entry barriers, and judging by the profits now, I'd say that everyone did a good job. A model that the more adult side of TikTok and social media follow even today. Aside from that, the shock exposure sites were at their peak. For the first time, insanely grotesque content was available to general audiences at the click of a button. And the worst part is that this shocking content became part of viral trends to expose as many unassuming fools to it as possible. Rest in peace to those caught by Lemon Party, Meat Spins, and Two Girls One Cup. If you don't know, I talk about those in my Trauma Iceberg and 2000 Screamer videos. Shock content was a meme comparable to how we send stuff like this monkey in a coat and IKEA to each other now, with no context. If you were on any social media from MySpace to Facebook, or even just had an email or AIM messenger, you were at risk of coming into contact with something that you'd rather not having your innocence destroyed by. There were also sites where people were becoming gorehounds, places where fiends just wanted to see a corpse or someone's demise out of morbid curiosity or sick amusement would go, like Rotten or Live Leak. Games weren't safe either. While sites for children's flash games seemed normal at first glance, you would eventually stumble on some wild games simulating like a real shooting, or even the Neopets chat rooms where groomers and bullies lurked for kids to harass. Sounds real familiar, huh? While not straight up advertised towards children, many flash games baited us into some shocking experiences like the Ugly, the PETA games, the Torture games, and Covetous. You start off by playing like Wrath Wars or Final Fantasy Sonic, and suddenly you're in the middle of hell, so dumb and morbidly curious that you're choosing to stay and give yourself nightmares. All the while you're constantly being bombarded by pop-ups and side ads. Yeah, before the dawn of ad block, we were getting attacked by all angles by
Congratulations, you won.
And women looking for men in their area. You click the X to close out these windows and 2 more windows would open up. Suddenly you're fighting for your life to not get your parents' computer hijacked and yourself grounded. And if you're around during this time using LimeWire or any other music or media pirate sites, you probably know a thing or two about getting a computer hijacked. I have a whole video out about this era and all the viruses in disguise and struggles that you had to minefield your way through just so you can download 50 cents in the club. So I'll give you a minute to watch that and come back. Don't worry, we'll wait. Okay, you done? Through all this, you learn real quick that the internet doesn't care how old you are. You click the wrong thing and your whole desktop is about to scream at you in Russian or something. But what might have been the scariest part about the internet in the 2000s was all the myths and madness that suddenly would spread across the web. Literally everything that you read would have some kind of psychological grip on you. For example, I know a lot of you know the old myth about kidnappers that would hide under a lone woman's car while she's pumping gas so they could cut her ankle and abduct her. Well, that actually began before the internet, but was even further spread due to being present on early internet forums and continuing to be spread as a precaution across social media even today. The net was and still is a crazy breeding ground for urban legends that still live in our subconscious. Many of them forced upon us without a choice. This was the plan of attack for chain emails, messages that encouraged the recipient to send or forward them to another person for good luck, to ward off a threat, or as a warning to them. While sometimes these came in the form of harmless pranks like some "send this if you love Jesus" message, other times it would be the scariest thing a kid would ever read. A few examples of the more harmful chain mails were screamers disguised as innocent games and messages, those ones about you being killed if you didn't forward it to X amount of people, hoaxes warning you about something that never actually happened, and ones containing links that could lead to you getting hacked. Bro, we were just getting hacked for anything, honestly. They didn't want us to live. And of course, there were creepypastas like the breakout star of the internet genre, Slenderman, which many kids quickly believed for some reason. What probably felt the most alien to us in the early net days were the forums and social media that made their presence known. These places are where early internet cultures were born and eventually led to where we are now. Many image boards and forums built themselves around being lawless, making them homes to super edgelords and a lot of shock content from straight up racism to the typical gore and prime. Honestly, that sounds a lot like modern day X. Wow, how that's so mainstream now when back then it was more of an underground thing. And yes, I do know that there were a lot of normal and just straight up nerdy image boards and forums. Shout out to Shoryuken. Also on the more innocent side of these net cultures, there were sites like MySpace, where all that mattered was finding the glitter code for your profile or the drama that your top 8 chart caused. However, what felt like the darkest side of this new world was the new chat rooms made available to everyone, like AIM Messenger. This AOL developed message service allowed complete strangers to chat instantly through text that would eventually blow up in popularity and become completely free for anyone to use. It allowed for group chats, friends lists, and file sharing between chatters, playing a huge role in what social media and online messaging is now. That includes all the bad that's part of the spear as well. There was catfishing before it was even called that, with adults constantly on there grooming kids and teens through fake profiles, famously seen many times on To Catch a Predator. Cyberbullying and public humiliation with people mass forwarding rumors, the normalizing of underage sexting, and let's not forget all of the vulnerabilities with people constantly getting caught by phishing links, IP grabbers, and other exploits that could F up your whole internet experience. Heck, some of y'all probably went around for the old YouTube days where not everyone was on the site just to watch content, upload videos, or comment. Back in the day, YouTube was a social media of its own, where people would customize their backgrounds of their channels like it was MySpace, and use them in their comment sections and YouTube's old Messenger to roleplay, chat, sext, and all that. It's insane how made up that sounds, but it's legit. I was there. And as you can probably tell by now, this was all fun and games until it wasn't anymore. Being a kid on the net in the 2000s was actually scary as AF. And yes, I said that, it's a habit. You would be in a chat room and mess with the wrong person, and suddenly this MF is sending you your address and IP just to scare you. Like, there was always this fear being spread by real happenings, the news, and urban myths that you were always being tracked or watched, leading to things like people constantly taping covers over their computer cameras. That joke about having a personal FBI agent wasn't a joke to everyone back then. That junk felt real and it legit freaked a lot of us out. Then you had the kids that would brick a whole family computer for doing the wrong thing, and once your parents checked the history, you may as well consider yourself a boomer because you're off in the net for a bit. So yeah, being a kid on the 2000s internet was like getting dropped into a digital war zone with no plates, map, or any idea of what's out there. We were legit throwing crap at the wall and seeing what clicked. Get it? Clicked? Yeah, seriously, it was messy, reckless, and dangerous for a lot of us to be doing what we were doing. And a lot of us came out with weird traumas, memories, and even kinks that you can't make up. The early internet didn't even try to pretend to protect us. In fact, it did the opposite and exposed us to a lot more than we were ready for. And that chaos kind of shaped us into the people that we are today, for better and for worse. Thankfully, this means that a generation was birthed that's actually prepared to monitor what the next is opposed to on the net. Cause I know if I ever have kids, they're getting one of those stupid phones with no internet or something until they're ready. It's really funny to look back at all this and amidst all the cries of internet censorship and whatnot, see how much things haven't really changed. Instead of forums, we have general social media where subgroups still branch off into their own communities. Instead of messengers, we have discords and Facebook messages and all that where weirdos typically still lurk. And you can still just as easily find about anything you have no business looking up with a quick Google search. After the world figured out what made kids tick in the 80s with He-Man, Transformers, and more, using cartoons as toy commercials, the FCC, or Federal Communications Commission, realized that this was kind of messed up. Kids were basically being brainwashed daily. Thus, in 1990, the Children's Television Act was passed, which stopped cartoons from being 30-minute advertisements. Suddenly, toy companies had to find new trends to chase. Video games were on the rise as the latest children's fascination, thanks to Nintendo's introduction of the first perfect home console experience, and would be the first taste of the future for many. And in 1989, the Game Boy would drop, selling 40,000 units in the US on release day, introducing kids to a portable digital game console. Now, while the world would see the advent of viral toy collecting with the Beanie Baby debacle in '93, it wouldn't be until 1996 when we would see a toy that would truly go globally viral. That toy was the Tamagotchi. In early 1992, Japan would go through an economic bubble burst, and in the midst of this, the Japanese toy company Bandai would task itself with developing a toy that could sell despite the turmoil. Akihiro Yokoi, a Japanese businessman and former president and CEO of Wiz, a Japanese toy manufacturer, would be struck with inspiration after witnessing a television commercial depicting a boy sad that he couldn't take his pet turtle with him on a trip. He was driven to create a simple mobile pet called the Tamagotchi, a toy aimed at young women, as he felt they were left out of the electronic toy market by brands like Nintendo's Game Boy. Tamagotchi is a combination of the Japanese word for egg and the English word watch, hence the original Tamagotchi being pitched as a wristwatch featuring the little digital monsters. Actually, those would come later.
Tamagotchi Angel, each sold separately from
Due to plastic costs being high, the Tamagotchi was re-envisioned into the keychain form that we see it as now, though the watch idea would pop up later as the Tamagotchi Smart. In October of 1996, 200 prototype Tamagotchi? Anyways, they were given out to high school girls located in Shibuya, Tokyo, and upon the next month, on November 23rd, 1996, the toy would see a full Japanese release and immediate success. This resulted in, you guessed it, a toy that mirrors the scarcity and rush to find one effect that Labubu has right now. Even before Tamagotchi hit globally, they became the talk of the world, resulting in the toy becoming a global success and a fashion trend.
It's my life, my best friend, my lover, say the girls. The object of their affections is the Tamagotchi, a virtual pet.
While children would be drawn in by the story of raising a cute alien or Digimon, as Bandai would release these as boy-oriented counterparts, adults and teens would hunt them down for the fashion statement they were becoming. Snoop Dogg, the Jonas Brothers, Jeanette McCurdy, George Lucas, and even current celebrities we have now all have been seen wearing, showing off, and advertising them. The world of toys suddenly saw a new market open right in front of it that featured digital toys of the future. And we'd see many companies jump onto the trend that Tamagotchi began, like the Gigapets, a much worse, uglier bootleg knockoff of the Tamagotchi made by Tiger Electronics. You know, that Tiger Electronics.
Wow, look at how badass this game is. Yeah, this is the hot shit right here.
Despite the school bands trying to put down the army of tech pets,
for teacher Elaine Luquier, the toy became a major distraction.
I'm trying to teach a lesson and I noticed that they weren't listening to me.
Bandai and Tiger would come out on top and the race to think of the next fake pet would begin. I know I just knocked Tiger for those crappy LCD games, but they would hit gold by releasing the next futuristic toy trend. But this time they wouldn't be relegated to screens, but pulled out into the real world.
What's that? It's my Furby. Furby loves you, lavender. Tickle me. Furby, the first.
Creators Dave Hampton and Caleb Chung would work together for 18 months to design and create a new toy. One that Hampton admits he came up with after seeing the Tamagotchi, a toy he didn't like, for the first time at a Bandai toy booth. The two men would come together and create what was conceptualized as a toy that would become a child's best friend. Thus, using a tennis ball, motors, speakers, and wire, the first Furby would be born. God, I hate looking at this thing. The duo attempted to license Furby twice and failed, but they would meet toy and game inventor Richard C. Levy after the second failure. Levy would introduce them and Furby to Tiger Electronics, who would buy the rights for it, and the rest is history. For $35, you could own your own furry freak, and everyone wanted one. Like any viral toy, Furbies became impossible to find, resulting in parents bending to the $100 price points from resellers during Christmas time.
This Christmas, it's Furby. You likely won't spot one on store shelves, though. There's just too many people trying to find one. But there's two of them hiding in Pam Schweikowski's closet, and she's offering them up to the highest bidder.
Nobody has offered me $1,000, but I have had offers from $150 to $650.
There were also tons of scams revolving around Furbies, with people paying third parties for them but never receiving them. Despite and due to all this, Furbies would see 27 million sold in a year. The robot craze finally hit the world, and it was time for everyone to attempt to get in on the action. But while Furby went for a more unique look, Japanese companies would attempt to make something a bit more tame and futuristic, evoking the love of a familiar household pet, but the technologic look that we all vibed with in '99 through the early 2000s. Sony's Aibo, Artificial Intelligence Robot, is a robot dog that was released in May of 1999. The story behind the dog is a long one that would take forever to get through, but it would become a hit, being used in the education field, its own sports league, and in tons of pop culture, which aided in making it a must-have toy of its time. Heck, it still has a following in buyers now due to being a true toy of the future, featuring never before seen artificial intelligence for the time. Here's the thing though, you weren't getting an eyeball unless you were rich. This robot companion went for $2,500 in 1999, which is around $5,000 today. So yeah, Timmy, you're gonna have to stick with that real dog that you have to feed, walk, and take to the vet instead. That is, until the year 2000, when Sega Toys would serve the masses a lower cost budget alternative to Aibo. While it didn't have the AI, the new robot dog on the block, Poochie, became the premier robot dog due to being fun, visually appealing, and above all, affordable.
Ooh, look at that Poochie. It's new Poochie, the ultimate pup. Who responds to your pat, your clap, or your wave.
He's rocking.
Selling for 38 United States beans, Poochie would release and sell 10 million units globally in 8 months, overshadowing Hasbro and Tiger Electronics' declining Furby line. And yes, this resulted in yet another viral toy war with resellers fighting parents and scarce toys. Poochie will be hip enough to come out with multiple editions such as a Disney collab with 102 Dalmatians, an upgraded Super Poochie, a cat Meowchi, a bird Chirpy-Chi, and so on. I'm sure many of you remember the McDonald's Happy Meal mini versions of these guys. Look at that. You know what? Y'all, oh my gosh, I'm about to make these look so lame. Poochie, wake up. Bro, I think Poochie's sleeping. All he's doing is barking for me. I can't get him to do any tricks or nothing. Okay, let's try Meowchi. Do I have to press his button first or something? Meowchi, no way. Oh, there we go. What, Meowchi's doing way more than Poochie? Oh wait, they're being friends. Okay, there we go. Dude, Poochie's insane. So, oh wait, I mean this looks crazy. Poochie, put your head back on. But yeah, Poochie and Meowchi are two very loud toys, and I don't recommend buying one. So yeah, that's the Poochie and Meowchi demonstration. And it kind of feels like I wasted my time. Look at that. Oh, he's doing it. Look, dude, he likes the bone. Look at him, look at him. He did it. His head came off too. The back of his head came off. Dude, he's going crazy. I think that's enough noise from Poochie and Meowchi. So let's get back to the normal video. Tiger Electronics would try to catch up with the ugly Robo Baby, and other successful robot dogs would hit the shelves like Techno the Robotic Puppy, but none of them were long for this world. The robot toy wars had finally ended, and the winner was the future. We were getting closer to the world that we live in now, where many kids have moved on from actual toys into portable consoles, computers, and more. The gimmicks were wearing off, and with the Nintendo DS releasing and its parent company changing the world yet again in 2004, Nintendo was back on top of the toy market. Not to mention the launch of YouTube and the advent of flash games, early web gaming, and online gaming, resulting in a shift in kid priorities that we see the evolution of now. iPad kids didn't appear in a day. In the early 2000s, toys were for kids. Beyblade, Bionicle, Bratz, and of course robot pets like Poochie. But today the market has hit a major shift. There are still toys aimed at kids, no doubt. But the ones that go viral these days are typically aimed at adults with an exposable income. Looking at Labubu, which isn't even a functional toy, which is blowing up despite doing nothing but being aesthetically pleasing. And sure, it's big for some kids too, but the main audience that won't shut up about it are adults, collectors, and fashion trend chasers. In 2007, the iPod Touch would enter the world, and kids would begin ditching the toys of the era for this all-in-one digital screen. Like I said in my last video, 2007 really felt like the end. Physical toys lost their central spot in childhood culture and would lose it more and more through the 2010s. However, as adults that grew up with these tactile eras started getting more nostalgic for opening Wonder Balls, Pokemon cards, Dragon Ball figures, and Marvel toys. And with more disposable income, the market changed to meet us. So what am I saying? Oh yeah, these viral toys aren't new at all. We've had many must-have toys since the beginning of time, it feels like. And the coolest ones just so happen to be from the 2000s. It's just funny that now we're at a time where toy trends aren't really chasing new audiences, but still following behind the same groups that they chased back in the day when they were kids, like me and you. And while things like Poochie seem silly now, they really show what made the experimental toy era of the 2000s so fun and memorable. What were your favorite toys from the 2000s, and did you have a Poochie or Tamagotchi? How long did your Tamagotchi last before you let it die, and how long before your parents ripped the batteries out of Poochie from giving them a headache? 2007 was a year. The iPhone was released, Google bought YouTube, the final Harry Potter book would drop, social media was growing like never before, and The Big Bang Theory premiered and would scar nerds with an even worse image than they already had, making them the butt of the joke for white moms everywhere. To me, 2007 didn't just mark a new age, it put the early 2000s in the retirement home, and laid the blueprint for a more sanitized, franchise-focused culture we still live in today. The early 2000s were marked by clunky optimism. Tech was exciting but goofy, movies were colorful, campy, and still riding that 90s wave. The internet was messy but full of personality. It was the last time things felt earnest, cringe even, but honest. Cringe in a good way, by the way. When 2007 came around, in real time, culture was changing and the age of technological optimism was coming to an end. The version we remember fondly from the early 2000s anyway, as we see the technology we only dreamt of in reality very soon, for the most part. Nerd culture was on the rise due to the amount of money to be made from children and man-children that wouldn't let go of the 80s. Everything got sleeker, darker, grittier, and more commercialized. It wasn't just the death of camp. It was the beginning of a more algorithmic time. And at the head of all this, two blockbuster films that embody this cultural shift in the media world better than just about anything else to me. A movie about a spider guy and a movie about a normal guy that rides inside a robot guy. See, media and culture had been somewhat building to the moment that 2007 was bringing to the world. MySpace had everyone glued to her early social media presence, putting music on their pages, taking aesthetic pictures, blinging out their web page. I don't know, I was too young to have a MySpace truthfully. Harry Potter was becoming a huge phenomenon, taking over the movie and book world. Hey, speaking of that, remember when it became common practice to spoil those films and books with the whole Snape kills Dumbledore thing?
Snape dies on page 658. Fred Weasley dies on page 637.
As with Harry Potter, this moment was the age of looking for fictional media to adapt to the big screen. Thus, we would see the rise of comic book films, with the world chasing after the success that 2002's Spider-Man and 2000's X-Men released to. The early seeds were being planted for the, hey guys, you were bullied and made fun of for no reason cause we all like comics and anime now, period. Yeah, despite explosive entries to the comic book movie genre, the culture was still largely anti-nerd in the 2000s and would continue to be so in the 2010s for a good bit. One thing that may have kept these films in the for nerds limelight is despite looking to translate themselves to realism and gritty visuals, comic book cinema still lended itself to a more optimistic, campier, and less dark aesthetic, even when they were literally dark. We had Spider-Man 1 and 2, X-Men 1, 2, and 3, Batman Begins, the original Hulk, Fantastic Four, Superman Returns, Daredevil, and Catwoman for some reason. All of these movies tried to ground the comic book world into a more realistic reality, but none of them were truly able to escape that camp feeling that we saw in the 90s Batman films like Batman Returns and Batman Forever. This isn't a bad thing, but to the average moviegoer, it's a feeling that can't be shaken and wouldn't be until later in 2007 when a film would release that would set the scene for the biggest game changers in the world of comic book cinema, 2008's Iron Man and Batman The Dark Knight. But before those two films, there was Michael Bay's 2007 blockbuster Transformers and Sony's flop or revisionist classic, depending on the camp that you're in, Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man! What's cracking, baby?
Which one set the groundwork for 2008? Well, technically both, but Transformers. It was Transformers.
Welcome to Burger King. Can I take your...
Yeah, a Whopper. No cheese, no onions. Extra pickles.
Sir, this is a drive-thru. You need a vehicle?
Fine.
You need a driver, too.
Oh, come on.
While both of these films have their share of differences, one similarity that they have is the immense amount of hype that they had on their way to theaters. If you were around during that time, you'll know that movie hype was built different back then.
Well, Toonami's hooking you up VIP style.
That's a good thing, right?
This Saturday night, we're showing you a bright and shiny sneak peek of the new Transformers movie after the Transformers Cybertron Marathon.
Movies and entertainment in general nowadays just feel like a given due to streaming and the pull that franchises like the MCU once had. They feel like they just happen and the build-up isn't there unless you're talking about something like Infinity War or Endgame. But back then, you were not getting away from the hype cycle. Transformers and Spider-Man 3 were huge landmarks for the movie world. The films, being for audiences of all ages, were literally inescapable. Spider-Man had iDog variants, Slurpee cups, a freaking bug habitat, those big head Burger King toys that we all wanted so bad as kids, and who can forget the Itsy Bitsy Spider-Man and Superhero Squad line? Transformers was no different, with Verizon ads, Mountain Dew crossovers, Lunchables promos, Burger King toys, the legendary Optimus Prime voice-changing helmet, and of course a Maxim contest cause the film featured Megan Fox in, kids movie. How many of you had your coming of age moments with that first scene with her checking out that car? And be for real. But regardless of all this exposure, as a kid of the era, I was in heaven. I already had my fair share of Spider-Man and Transformers toys, sure, but I had to get my favorite characters for their big screen debut, Venom and Starscream, aka two of the biggest letdowns of my life.
You fail me yet again, Starscream.
Despite the disappointment ahead, this was a huge moment for the world of blockbusters, and for the time, it felt like there was no beating this combo of releases. Upon reveal and eventual release, the mission for both films was clear. Spider-Man 3 was the end of an era and potentially the start of Spider-Man's future, wrapping up the Uncle Ben, Goblin, and Peter's growth and relationship arc by bringing in one of his most iconic enemies, Venom. Meanwhile, Transformers was attempting to adapt a new nerd franchise for audiences and make it hip enough to pull it out of the geekdom and start a new cinematic universe by making it cool to mainstream audiences, beginning a new era of blockbusters. Both of these films represent the end and change of a stage so well in these missions and their presentation. Let me explain, because it kind of sounds like I'm waffling a bit, right? Spider-Man 3 basically closed the door. It was the last superhero film that really felt like a product of that old 2000s era. While not completely successful in its goals, it was a film full of heart, whereas a lot of comic book films now and after this felt like products before movies. Spider-Man 3 was a classic Raimi camp fest. One of those movies that gets better with age, which sets it apart from the new comic book movies that flop and end up being unwatchable garbage that you can tell was just made to set up something and make money. While Spidey 3 fell into that trap due to studio interference, you can still really feel Raimi's, the writers, and the cast's hearts throughout the runtime. It's actually somewhat enjoyable, but its overall failure would see this purposefully campy tone done away with for good, as seen in movies like Iron Man and The Dark Knight, which were made to avoid any goofiness that their forefather comic book flicks reflected. Spider-Man 3 felt like a last gasp of sincerity in the mainstream summer superhero blockbuster, which is ironic because of what ruined it. It's a messy story but human and full of feeling, cringe, and passion. Once again, good cringe. Not saying new blockbusters always avoid this, but we were entering an epoch where that wasn't the case. Why do you think Barbie, Oppenheimer, Parasite, and Godzilla -1 were celebrated so much recently? On the other hand, we had Transformers. Before I start, yeah, I like this entry. But this was definitely the beginning of the IP spectacle film that franchises like the MCU, DCU, Hollywood monsters, and other future films would follow behind. This was the quintessential prototype for modern Hollywood blockbusters, full of CG, product placement, marketability, and lots of military-esque vibes. Oh, and don't forget the modern hip humor.
I ate the whole plate.
This was where the world discovered what made the nerd IP quote-unquote cool. Many tropes you see way down the MCU can be traced back here somewhat. And what's funny is that the MCU fans were cracking jokes on Michael Bay adaptations back in the day too. The cinematic universe was coming to fruition, and the writers already had plans which would take form as various sequels, prequels, and spin-offs that would expand the Transformers movie world, which includes a Bumblebee movie, Operation Skyfire, which was a film set during World War II, Knights, a film that would team Transformers with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round, a Beast Wars spin-off, and a G.I. Joe crossover. So yeah, Transformers laid out the algorithmic blueprint, and every major franchise would follow. Both of these films were very similar, but they rode nostalgia and their nerd roots in different ways, and they both showcased the change of the landscape from a director-driven one to a brand-driven one that we have now. Transformers didn't just make giant robots cool to mainstream audiences, but redefined what a blockbuster looked like. It wasn't just telling a story anymore, but building a franchise until that franchise finally fails. Studios saw that money and ran with it, paving the way for cinematic universes and algorithmic storytelling. Within a year, Iron Man would hit theaters and successfully jumpstart the MCU. The Dark Knight would also release and dominate the theaters. Superheroes, for a time, wouldn't be colorful or cringy. They'd become more military-esque and mainstream cool. Nerd culture would start to become more marketed than ever, sanitized and ready for wider audiences, kinda like Funko Pops. 2007 marked the shift. Spider-Man 3 felt like the end of a personal, slightly messy but heartfelt era of early 2000s media, while Transformers ushered in the polished, franchise-driven future that would define the 2010s. These movies didn't just reflect the changing film industry, they signaled the end of the early 2000s as we knew it. So yeah, a spider guy and a guy riding in a robot guy didn't just take over theaters in 2007. They marked the moment that everything changed and the end of soulful cringe. Well, almost. We still have some soulful cringe out there. But what do you think? Am I spitting or just waffling? I truly feel that 2000 through 2006 was the true era that people are talking about when speaking on 2000s nostalgia. While 2007 would bring in so much that we all dislike about the 2010s and even now, and the beginning of that all was the release of so much media in 2007. Regardless of your thoughts, please like and subscribe if you enjoy and leave a comment on your stance and memories with 2007's media and culture. I would love to read it all, and trust I do read all these comments. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I see you next time.